Hello everybody, this is Antonio Wolf doing my usual walks with my little buddy over there. And look at these fields, I mean, God, it's so nice. But anyways, just some thoughts. I've continued to read Schelling's essay on freedom with a couple of my friends, Hyperion and Joshua. And you know what? I've gone to the point. We've made it to the point where we've got to the middle section of the essay, which has all the weird cosmogony and theology in it. And this time I read it again, and wow, it makes a lot more sense than the last couple of times where I read it. You know, I don't understand why, really. I suppose it's simply literally what happens when you just practice reading philosophy carefully over time. You know, I don't know why, honestly. The first few times that I read that, it just seems so stupid. And this time I'm reading it, and it makes so much more sense. You know, quite a lot of sense, actually. It's just, I think it's still weird. I don't like the theological way he talks about things. Nonetheless, you know, I can actually see and say that, boy, that's not as bad as I used to think it was. But anyways, something related to that is, you know, I want to have a little bit of a monologue about reason, freedom, and the problem of evil. Schelling brings up quickly, entering the second part of his essay, that since pantheism has been proven by the first part of the argument to have nothing to do with the question of freedom, because Spinoza did not believe in freedom, nonetheless he was a pantheist, and mystics believe in freedom, and nonetheless they are pantheists. Therefore, the question of freedom must have nothing to do with pantheism itself. So then, what is the pertinent question of freedom? You know, what is, if the necessity which is found in pantheism and the unity of system is not the issue that contradicts freedom, what is? And Schelling brings up the issue of the choice for good and evil. And obviously, this is not a popular conception of this issue, except for, you know, theological circles. And normally, rightfully so, because the issue just doesn't seem to really resonate in the theological manner that it's normally put. You know, and even Schelling's way of putting it is distasteful to me, because he puts it in the sense of the theological problem of evil of, well, okay, so if freedom is the choice for good and evil, how does this relate to God? You know, can we say God is evil? And he says, well, obviously that can't be the case, because, you know, we all know that God is perfect and good. I mean, just going with the Christian dogma. And it's not just the Christian dogma, by the way. It's also just mystical dogma too, because you find this stuff in like Hinduism and pretty much every other place. You know, the idea that the ultimate reality is, you know, bliss, love, you know, wholeness, you know, just pure being. Come on. Come on. And so, you know, it's not just a Christian concern, but the Christian concern is this weirdest one of all. Simply because... come on. It's with you. What do you want? He doesn't want to walk this way, but he's going to walk this way, whether he likes it or not. Come on. Because, by the way, it doesn't just arise in Christianity. If you look into Hindu philosophy, say something like, I Advaita Vedanta coming from, oh man, I can't remember, big name, and I can't remember right now. Adi Shankara. Adi Shankara has his own problem of this sort, although it's not phrased in the typical Western terms of, the problem of freedom. And just give me a moment so I can fix my dog's harness. Sorry about that. In which, there is a conception of freedom that's necessary also in Hindu religion. The idea of dharma, dharma. It's kind of hard to do the Indian pronunciations. They pronounce their H's. Come on. Concerns having some sort of blame on the individual for, for the reality of their lives. Stuff like karma is on you. And somehow you're supposed to find a way to balance out your karma, or, get rid of your bad karma. So, eventually you get reborn and you can achieve moksha, bodhi, or so whatever other word there is for enlightenment or liberation from the cycle of incarnation. But then the question arises, well, how the hell did you get here? I mean, really, how'd you get here? How can you be responsible for all of this? What do you mean it's my fault? What do you mean I did something in my last life? I can't remember it. How can I be guilty? It just brings up so many questions of people who claim that somehow we must be responsible for what's happening to us, entirely, and issues just arise with that. Well, how can that be if it seems that we have no control over this? It's not like we willed ourselves into existence. It's not like we're a criminal who can atone, because we don't even remember what the hell we're supposed to be atoning for. So how can we do it? And it's a really bad set of arguments. And they're rampant through religion, and they're rampant through mysticism, this whole issue. And it sucks. But anyways, Schelling brings up the issue of the choice of good and evil. And he doesn't really give much explanation as to why we should take that seriously. Although I think that, on the face of it, you kind of should take it seriously. In that, when you really think about it, what kind of freedom would we have if we couldn't choose to be good or to be evil? Whatever that means. He doesn't clarify what that means yet in that portion of the essay. Hegel has a concept of evil, and evil is finitude. So, Hegel gets to say some funny, somewhat weird things, like nature is evil. And he says, the Bible is right to say that nature is evil and that man is evil by nature because, hey, man is a natural being. And nature is finite, unlike spirit. Spirit is infinite. And therefore, everything natural is to that extent evil. And everything that, is a will towards the finite is to that extent evil as well. So there's a concept of evil there that makes sense. And Schelling has something somewhat like that, where evil is this desire to just, subsume everything into a darkness of sorts. He goes on his theological stuff, his cosmogony, talking about the Urgrund, the primal ground of everything, which is this primal will that doesn't want to be brought out into the light. Nonetheless, light came out of that primal will, so there must be light immanent to it. There must be some positivity in it. But this primal will is always trying to drag everything back down into its undifferentiated. Whoa! Sorry, I'm almost slipping on the side of these little banks here. So anyways, to go into what I was intending to say. There has to be this problem of necessity and freedom, as well as the choice of good and evil, in which we know things are morally good or morally bad, and we have to be able to choose one or the other. If we cannot choose to do the immoral, then we're not really moral beings. Morality is a matter of choice. It's not a matter of being. You can't have a set of, say, some mythical aliens that only do good, and you say, oh, they are moral people. No, they're not. They cannot be a moral people. If they cannot choose to do evil, then they cannot be moral people. And if there are people, out there who just cannot choose to do good, they also cannot be immoral people. They're amoral. It's like their being is not enough to justify any moral judgment of them. They do not exist. They don't inhabit a realm of morality as such. And that's like, where freedom seems to be the most pertinent. These philosophers aren't interested in stuff like the everyday freedom of, well, I'm going to choose a burger instead of, a salad. That's not a really meaningful freedom. Choice in itself is not indicative of much of anything, because choice in itself does not indicate anything higher. You can have choices that are meaningless. You can have this brand of shampoo or that brand of shampoo, but they're virtually the same thing. Still cleans your hair. Maybe you like the smell of one or the other, but that's not really much of a meaningful choice. But nonetheless, a meaningful choice would be a choice that has a deep impact on your reality and your existence. And one of those would be, say, the choice to murder somebody or not, the choice to go to war, the choice to, you're hungry and you can't do anything other than think about how to feed yourself, and you see a pie on the windowsill, and are you going to steal it or not? That's a moral choice, and it's wrong, but nonetheless, you have to choose: are you going to do it or are you not? Which you have to take into considerations all these other things, and the morality is not mechanical. Ultimately, sometimes the moral choice is not the choice that our gut tells us to make. Sometimes, our intuitions are very much against morality. Morality is against our intuitions. And so, to choose to be moral, to choose to do good, and to choose to do evil are very important choices. And the question is, well, how does freedom play into this? How is this even a meaningful distinction of choice? And to connect to what Schelling is saying, it's like this whole issue of how do you become free in the first place, which is, you're not born free. Of course, Rousseau says man is born free, but everywhere he is in chains. That's not true. You're born quite unfree. This is a misunderstanding of freedom, in which, freedom is just, this la-di-da choice, just for choice's sake. But real freedom is a freedom which comprehends what it is choosing and willfully chooses knowingly what it is going to do. So if you don't have that, you can't say you have freedom. It's taking a sweet time. So, so suppose take a regular human being. You grow up, you're not born free. You're born with, as much as a lot of leftists want to deny this, you're born with a natural character. Some people are more calm, some people are more angsty, some people are just grouchy, some people have, far more, are more rational, some people are more emotional. What is with you? He's being such a bad boy today. Come on. Come on. Come on. Come on. God, he's being stubborn. I mean, like, it happens every once in a blue moon, but he's being abnormally stubborn today. He usually just, likes to just follow along with me, slow as may be. Oh, well, fine. I'll leave you behind, and you can lounge here all you want, because I want to walk around. Sorry about that. So anyways, where was I? Freedom of choice. Natural characters, we were born natural characters. Everybody knows that. If you've had kids, if you have siblings, you know that the character of people is something quite natural. It's not given by society. You weren't taught it. You just are. And so you start out with that natural determination. And, beyond that, there's the environment in which you will imbibe cues from your environment, as to what is effective and what is not. You may start out being a highly emotional crybaby, but you'll learn very quickly that either gets you what you want or that doesn't get you what you want, and it might actually get you some punishment. And so you quickly have to adapt to those things. You start learning culture. You start getting cues from those around you. They like you or they don't like you. They're nice to you or they're not. And beyond that, there's those interactions that socialize you. And then you start getting socialized into language. You're starting to learn the social games of, what do people do? How do they do it? How do you ask for things? How do you work through things? And beyond that, eventually you rise up into the higher forms of cognition. You start articulating things linguistically. Depending on, how good your upbringing is, you're going to be taught how to solve problems in certain ways, how to deal with things. That's part of the acculturation. And really the final and last piece of the human being is actually rational articulation, in which you have to learn how to think. You have to learn the value of thinking. And not everybody gets that, and everybody, even if they're given the opportunity for that, will get it. What is with you? What are you doing here? What are you doing here? It's not my car, by the way. Don't know whose car that is. Where was I going? Yes, you're taught how to reason. And then there's the question of, can you attach emotion to reason? Because I think that's probably one of the most important things to do. And how do you do that? We don't know. Why is it that people end up valuing reason? There's various reasons. One of them is, clearly rational thinking and rational articulation has a value, but it's not an immediately clear value, and it's not a value that you can actually explain to irrational people. You either are, it's like Hegelian concepts, you're either in it or you're not. And if you're not in it, it's out of your league. You're talking, it's like talking to somebody about love when they haven't been in love. You're talking about reason to somebody who has never reasoned, and they're just not going to get it. And freedom really has to do with that interplay between reason and emotion. What is the ultimate reason that we subsume everything by. You know, are we just going to subsume it under emotion? Are we just going to subsume everything under an abstract formal logic? You know, just to talk about people who err both ways and err monstrously. You know, if you just look at things, you think that emotion is what justifies everything. You know, feeling good, feeling happy, or feeling elated, feeling whatever. You know, pleasure. You know, you're hedonist. That's not a good way to live your life. That's not a good way to deal with the world, because that will lead to a lot of unintuitive and rather atrocious things to be done, which, you know, when you really think about it, it's like, Jesus Christ, why would you do that? How could you do that? And other people go the other way, you know, just pure abstract reason. People like, say, Destiny, the video game streamer. People like that have a monstrous form of reason, which leads them to horrific conclusions against their own intuitions. You know, and I doubt that Destiny could actually kill somebody just for the sake of it. But nonetheless, in his logic, that kind of thing is okay. You know, and he says, well, I can't, you know, judge anybody else because, you know, in my form of reason, that's just what follows. And, you know, I'm just going to go with that form of reason, regardless of how monstrous it seems. And those two things are very, very, very bad. Nonetheless, people make that choice. And the question now remains, why would they make that choice? And there's this mix, you know, reason, that freedom has to do with this tension between reason and feeling, between knowledge and what you want. And it doesn't immediately give you an answer. You know, you know, you can be like Kant and say, well, look, if you think about it this way, the only way that you really are free is in reason. You know, therefore, even if you go against your own emotions, that's the only way to be free. So even if you're doing these things that seem monstrous, it's the only way to be fully self-determining. And I think that Schelling's whole issue of the choice between good and evil is a good one, because it brings in an issue that is not clear in the mere language of self-determination. Because yes, freedom is self-determination, but there's something in that has to come up far later, which is necessary for us, and that is the choice. You know, it's not just simply choice, but the choice to be moral or immoral, and that if you get rid of this choice, you can't really be talking about a free society. You can't be talking about a free world. This choice has to be possible. This choice has to be real. And then the question is, how is this choice possible, really? You know, how can we make sense of this choice in a way that we can really assert that this is what we mean by freedom? You know, Schelling ends up later talking about how, you know, to be free is to be according to your essence. But if your essence is not in accord with reason, and you know this, you know, if you just have these urges to murder people, and you know that this is bad, and nonetheless you choose to do it, you know, a lot of people will kind of go, oh, poor bastard, oh, you know, poor guy, you know, he just couldn't help himself. And a lot of other people, the majority, will go and say, fuck that, you know, he knew it was wrong, they knew it was wrong, she knew it was wrong, the aliens knew it was wrong. By the way, I mean, like, just to bring something up, just to bring up something weird. You've probably never looked into alien abductions. I have. Fascinating topic. I like weird stuff. But anyways, look, a lot of people justify this crap about, oh, the aliens, you know, abduct us, and they're like, well, you know, it's not really abductions. You know, like, to us, you know, we are to aliens as, you know, like little lion cubs in the Sahara are to us. You know, we sometimes have to go in and, you know, just like kidnap them for a little bit to tag them and give them like vaccines or some shit. And then, you know, we let them back loose in the wild, and they're confused, and they're like, what the hell's going on? And, you know, they probably go and, like, you know, if they could speak languages, they probably go to their mom or their family, and they're like, holy shit, these monstrous beings came from, you know, the woods or the sky in a helicopter, God knows what, and, you know, kidnapped me, and they did these weird things I don't understand. and it was horrible. And they're like, but maybe they're just like, they're trying to study us. They're doing a capture, tag, and release. No, they're not. I assure you that aliens, if they can build craft like they do and get here, whether it is across dimensions, whether it is across wormholes or space-time, whatever, these beings are very well aware that what they're doing is morally wrong, and they choose to do it anyways. They're assholes. That's what I consider them, a bunch of fucking assholes. Whether you believe that stuff is real or not, by the way. I mean, it's just a fun scenario. I think there's weird stuff to do with that. Whether people who get abducted and what they say or claim happens to them, or whether what these entities supposedly tell them about what they're doing is actually true, highly questionable. I mean, it's just as far as that goes, there's a bunch of stories, but there's some kind of evidence to that. It's not evidence for much. You can at least get evidence that something happened, not what. And sometimes people have mundane explanations. The easiest ones that people bring up is like, well, you're just hallucinating, man. You were in the middle of sleep. You had sleep paralysis, and it's a common occurrence. And no, it's not. That explanation doesn't work. But either way, it's kind of funny. But anyways, point is that they know what they're doing is wrong. They know that you can't do that to rational beings. And look at this fucking tree. Ain't that a cool image? It's like a headdress. So they know what's wrong. They know what's up. But going back to that this choice has to be there, because if it's not, we're not free. But then the question always remains, how can we be free? Like the possibility of freedom is this tension between two forms of determination: a rational determination and an irrational determination. And whether we're going to choose the irrational or the rational. The rational always errs towards, unity, and the irrational always errs towards subjective individuality. What is evil ultimately? Hegel says evil is finitude, and you look at all the things that people do that are evil, and that makes good sense. That it's always selfish. Selfishness is always me. It's the individual, the finite over the whole. And we want to do those things. You can't lie to yourself that you've never had these urges to just please yourself and fuck everybody else. That if you could, you would. So many people, honestly, if they had the power, they just would. They would fuck everybody else. And just, go and do for self. Is that rational in the end? No. You destroy society. You destroy the basis of your own world. If you choose yourself over the universe, well, you're going to die too, moron, because the universe is going to be gone, and so will you. But that brings up that issue that I was mentioning, that how does this make sense? So, freedom has to do with this tension of two choices between reason and unreason, between the whole and the finite. And holy shit, bumblebees are huge. I stepped on one once, and I don't know if you ever stepped on like something like that's bigger than like a pebble, but it's not like hard like a pebble, but it's like that kind of like solid but squishy at the same time. And Jesus Christ, that feels it's like stepping on a mouse or something. I don't know how people can do that. Couldn't do it. It just creeps me out. But yeah, you're caught up between these two determinations, and how do you choose? Nonetheless, freedom remains this weird in between of the will, in which how does the will determine itself? And that's the big question, really. How does the will determine itself? Schelling provides an answer which is, in my opinion, absolutely unsatisfactory. He ends up saying something like, well, in the phenomenal world, once we're in here, it becomes very, very difficult to make much of a determination. And that is, there's some rabbits jumping around in the bushes over there. And that is that, insofar as we're stuck in nature, there's a lot of times where we can just give a historical, we can give a physical reason for, why somebody did something. You can give a psychological reason, but these reasons don't explain, it don't give you a factor of freedom. And yet there is no other way that you could do this. There is no other way to make this sensible. If you get rid of any determination which is pre-given, which is irrational, not against the rational determination, you're going to have the issue of how the hell are you going to get freedom into this without something determinate to be free. You have to be determined, you have to already be determinate to be talking about the issue of am I free or am I not. I have to be something, I have to be someone already. And the issue of coming to choose who I am and what I am happens through reason. I have to become aware that there are other things that I could do. There has to be this tension between desires. And the ultimate choice between desires is, what is my ultimate reason? Is my ultimate reason irrational, or is my ultimate reason rational? Do I choose reason or do I choose unreason? And if you want to give a rational account for that, I don't think you can. It doesn't seem that can really ever satisfy, simply because we have generally a really weird intuition about what freedom is, and we don't understand it. It's an irrational conception of freedom. We think freedom is to not be determined, that that somehow we can determine ourselves without having determination, but that doesn't make any sense. But if we have a determination, the way we determine ourselves is going to be through mediating that given determination first. It's not that we just abstract ourselves into pure reason, and this is who we really are, and then we choose, whatever embodied unreason we want to take on. We cannot choose our desires. God knows if we could, life would be a hell of a lot easier. You can't choose who to fall in love with. You can't choose who to hate. You can't choose who to like. You can't choose your kinks. You can't choose pretty much anything that's really important in your life. You can't choose to love your vocation. You can't choose to love a subject. You can't choose to hate a subject. You just can't do those things. And nonetheless, those things are exactly the kind of things that you are, and they're the things that you are free to do and free to choose against if you wish. Whether your feelings, whether your emotions, or whether your reason goes one way or another. So I was having this discussion with my friend Josh yesterday while we were reading Schelling, and he brought this up, and he says, I'm kind of confused now about how does this make sense? How can we be free if we have these determinations? It really doesn't make sense. But the other alternative doesn't make sense either. You have to be someone, you have to be something. And it seems to me that the key is that tension between the two desires. Do you desire reason or you desire unreason? And whether you do or do not desire either one of these has to do with who you already are and what kind of imminent desires you already have. Not everybody has a passion for reason. Not everybody has a passion for unreason. Some people love the crazy life. They love the unhinged experience of the world, where they go crazy one day and they're fine the other, and they go crazy the next day and they're fine the other, and they like that, and they can't imagine life any other way. And you try to tell them and explain to them, like, look, you're destroying yourself. Don't you want to ever be stable? And they say, like, well, I love my life that way. Well, okay, well, it's your choice. Even though, I think that in those cases it becomes increasingly hard to see it, that these people are actually free, that they don't realize that they aren't free. They feel they're free. And then obviously there's questions of, well, are we right to judge them as unfree? Are we right to judge them as free? So the element of choice, the element of this tension between reason and unreason. We are somebody, we have original dreams, we have these other things. Freedom comes about when we encounter alternatives, which are real alternatives, not just simply ideal, not just simply fictitious. And we mediate those reasons through those irrational reasons through rational reason. And then we have a second determinate choice, and that choice is the final choice. That choice is a choice in which I became aware of who I am, what I want to be, what is available, and then I choose to be or not to be any of those things. But I knew and I chose willingly. I knew exactly what I was choosing. I knew what was implicit in those choices. And so that mystery of freedom lies, I think, really in that issue, in the issue that I am determined. I have to come to a comprehension of that determination itself, how I am determined, why I am determined. I have to come into consideration of how that relates to my world, how that relates to my being, how that relates to both my physical, contextual, mental being, and finally, how that relates to logic. How does that relate to the way the world actually is, and whether this will lead me to self-destruction or whether this will lead me to a prosperous endurance of some sort, whether it be material, mental, psychological, spiritual, whatever you want to think. That's your choice. But you have to know all those factors in order to finally be free. You have to be in knowledge of what the necessity of the world is, and what your necessity is, and whether your necessity and the world are in conformity or at odds. Finally came up here. Anyways, one last view around here. These hills do become beautiful once the spring hits. These wildflowers, and there's some freeways around here where there's various kinds of wildflowers, very, very beautiful. Blues, yellows, reds, some purples, pinks. Right in the middle of the freeway, just big strips, probably sometimes a couple miles long, and they're really, really nice. But anyways, this has been Antonio Wolf, just rambling a bit about freedom, and I'll keep thinking about that. I'll probably write something eventually on this. It's very interesting. I still haven't read what Hegel says about it, but rereading Schelling has jogged my brain a bit. So, see you around.